This lecture is about genetics with special guest star Hank. Also joining us is lovely mother and burly father to help explain how genetics works. Genetics is a fascinating field, but it is vast, and over the last couple of decades the amount we know has grown tremendously. And with that comes a dizzying array of terms that really are potentially confusing for the beginning student. I'm not going to try to go over all of these, but we'll cover most of them in this overview of genetics. It may help to think of terms in the sense of verbs and nouns. Here I've made verbs, or the processes, in red, and nouns, the actual stuff of DNA, in black. Story of Hank. Hank, let's talk about how you came into being. Well, in terms of genetics, Mom and Dad both had DNA. There's your dad's, there's your mom's. So I'm going to represent that DNA by these long strands, because DNA is a long strand of nucleotides that give us instructions for how we're supposed to build a cell, how to operate it, and that translates up into the entire body. So it really is the instruction manual for our cells. But for you to be you, you're not mom and you're not your dad. You are a mix of both, and the reason that happened is because their DNA went through a process of meiosis. So in their cells, in certain cells, the sex cells, your dad cut his DNA in half, and some of that went into his gametes. I know this is a sensitive topic. You might not want to hear this, Hank. In your mom, that went into an egg cell or an ovum. Oh, sorry, I didn't split it. Gotta split it. Can only pass on half, not the whole thing. Otherwise you end up with too much DNA. This is really a lot of DNA in a small space. Each cell has something like 6 feet of DNA. Along with meiosis, there's a couple of terms that are often associated with inheritance. Segregation occurs along with independent assortment. I'm just going to throw those terms in there and not explain them too much right now, just to associate them with something that happens during meiosis. Fertilization is the next step, where that half of your dad's DNA meets half of your mom's DNA, and they all combine into the first cell that really is you, Hank. So there you are, first cell. There you're a zygote. This is your entire genome. You got half of it from mom, half of it from dad, and there it is, sitting in your nucleus. Now, when we start moving DNA around, it looks like this in a lot of cells, but typically in a biology class, we tend to look at chromosomes, which are DNA very neatly coiled up around proteins called histones and organized into pieces that are called chromosomes. In humans, those chromosomes occur in our nucleus. We have 46 of them. I'm just going to cut that number down to 6 to make it a little easier and leave the other 40 aside. So we got the blue ones. These are the ones that came from your dad, and the red ones came from your mom. And you'll notice that there's some similarities. Your mom gave you a short one, and so did your dad, and they both gave you this medium one, and they both gave you this nice long one. These similar length, or same length, chromosomes are known as homologous chromosomes. They contain the same information, maybe slightly different forms. The information comes in genes. So little segments of this chromosome, remember this is all made out of DNA, have a sequence of nucleotides. So remember that your DNA is made out of monomers of adenine and thymine and guanine and cytosine. And depending on how you put those letters together, kind of like making a sentence, you make a gene that has instructions for one specific thing. Very often that's making a protein. Now different versions, different nucleotide sequences Maybe the version your mom gave you had an A in one spot, and the version your dad gave you had a G in a different spot. So that makes these different. Those different versions of the same gene are known as alleles. And the combination of these two together, the fact that you got two different ones, is significant. That's your genotype, the mix of alleles that you have. What I've represented here is that you're heterozygous. You have two different alleles. If you got the two of the same ones at that same location, you would be homozygous. All right, so we've got to use this DNA. I'm just going to do this here. It happens in every cell of your body all over the place all the time. But I'm just going to use this zygote, this first cell, to talk about gene expression. You've got to do something with this DNA. And that happens one gene at a time. So let's take this gene right here from your mom, this little segment of DNA, and the first step in gene expression is transcription, where enzymes in here are used to make some RNA. So this little segment is RNA. Now we're done with transcription. We keep our DNA safe in the nucleus. The RNA exits the nucleus, finds a ribosome, and the ribosome is going to help translate this code into something that your cell can use. We typically don't use the DNA directly. We'll make things with it, like a bunch of amino acids stuck together and folded up into a protein. There can be a channel, it can be a pump in the cell, it could be part of the cytoskeleton, it could help make melanin, it could be enzymes. Proteins do lots of important functions. The kind of collective expression of all these proteins we could call your phenotype, how that expresses itself on a larger scale. All right, so now we got this cell functioning, expressing genes, but you obviously need more than one cell to make you, Hank. Hank, how many cells do you think you have in your body? I don't know, it's got to be thousands. More than thousands, Hank. It's in the trillions. And to make more cells, obviously we need instructions for each cell. And so we're going to start this process by replicating the DNA. The DNA in replication, enzymes come in again and make exact copies. This has got to be done just right, or there are errors along the way. And then we know what happens when there are errors. If we get errors, that's called a mutation. You very well could have ended up looking like that, Hank. We don't like mutations. All right, so we got replication all sorted out, and what we've made is a bunch of sister chromatids. Each of these pairs are sister chromatids. Once you split them apart, then they're individual chromosomes again, but this is sort of the magic in how this process works by itself. There's no little alien inside your cell directing this process and saying, you chromosome go over there and you go over there, and make sure we have the right 46 chromosomes on this side and the right 46 on this side. The fact that they're matched up, you'll see in a minute, helps us get through this process. Well, chromosomes don't just move by themselves. There's microtubules that need to come in and grab onto them and move them around. We need to get rid of this nuclear envelope in order to make that happen. So I'm just going to kind of shove this out of the way. And I'll use my fingers as microtubules to move these chromosomes around, line them up, and then pull them apart, pulling one sister chromatid to each side. And you'll notice that now I have two medium ones on this side. I have two long ones on that side, which is just what I started off with. Exactly what I started off with. They're all split up evenly. And now what I have is not yet two cells, but really two nuclei once mitosis is done. I need one more step. I'm sorry, that's mitosis. I think I said that, didn't put it in there. One more step, cytokinesis. Cyto always refers to cell. I'm going to have to split this cell, and now I have two individual cells. So that zygote started as one cell, and I've made two. Each of these two can make two more, so I'd have four. And those 4 cells could each make 2, which would have 8, and so on. It doesn't take long to get into the millions once we start seeing that exponential growth of cells, but it takes a lot of energy, a lot of DNA, and very careful work along the way. Once we're here, we're up to Hank, the multicellular organism with lots of these cells, each of them having identical pieces of DNA. And so Hank has all his DNA. He might even choose to go through meiosis. Well, I guess you don't really choose to do that, but he could go through meiosis and fertilization, have his own kids, pass his DNA on, and we get this life cycle that we've been through one turn of just now. All right, more detail on each of these processes in other videos.